All right, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Parish and Community. My guest today is Jenny Connelly-Bowen. She's the Executive Director of Community Builders Network, and I'm going to let Jenny tell us what that is and what that's all about.
Yeah, thank you for having us, for having me. We're excited to be here and talk a little bit about our work with our neighbors down the street. Although I don't know about you, but we're not in our offices right now, so we're kind of down the street in spirit, but as we all are. The Community Builders Network, or CBN for short, is actually 10 years old next year. So we were founded in 2011. We're a coalition of community building organizations that span a big variety of sectors. So there are founding organizations that came together to found us in 2011 were community building nonprofits. So often those are community development corporations or neighborhood associations, but basically nonprofits that are doing community building work in a specific neighborhood or cluster of neighborhoods. But we also have a number of members that don't do that work directly, but support it. So that includes anchor institutions like universities, government, lenders and banks, local business, private developers, philanthropy. I mean, it really takes a huge constellation of different actors and entities to make this work happen. So that's sort of the foundations of CBN. The glue that holds everybody together is this, deep and abiding belief that strong and inclusive communities are the building blocks for a better St. Louis. And CBN as a network exists and was created to really help support, connect, and celebrate the neighborhood and regional leaders that make these places possible. So as I mentioned, we were founded in 2011 by a group of it was around 30 community building nonprofits who saw a need for a network like CBN to do three big things. One was to act as a shared table for peer support and mutual learning. We all know that any kind of profession can be, grueling and difficult, and that it's better when we come together and learn from each other and support each other. So that collaboration is amazing and key. That's number one. Number two, similarly, in a related way, was to create a space and a shared voice for advocacy issues that are important to community building work. So, this is really, really important for making change. And it's especially important in places, and I don't think this is unique to St. Louis. I think this is everywhere when you're dealing with, this is the way we've always done things and trying to make things different. It can feel really scary and dangerous to go out on your lonesome as, one organization or two organizations and really speak up about stuff that really, really needs to change. And it's easier to do that when we stand together and do it as a big group. So that's number two. Number three is really to help support the community building field with storytelling, basically spreading the word about what it takes to make a community a really great place to live, and why strong communities matter. So most of our work today is still focused on those three areas, basically supporting strong organizations, creating supportive systems to support those organizations, because we all know that organizations and people are only as strong as the systems that they're operating in, and sharing stories. And in previous years, in the last few years, we've also evolved into a supporter and a convener for other community-based coalitions in the region that are working toward a stronger, more equitable St. Louis across a variety of issue areas. That includes, vacancy, affordable housing, economic development, racial equity, all kinds of stuff. So no 2 days are the same, and we get to work with some really, really incredible people and organizations that really want to see a better St. Louis, and it's a privilege to be a part of this work.
Mentioning how no 2 days are the same, I was going to ask what this looks like on a day-to-day. I'd imagine it's a lot of right now, probably a lot of virtual convening, but it's a lot of shared tables, a lot of getting people in a room together.
Yeah, it's always a hard question to answer because every day is super different. But a big core of our work is having meetings, bringing people together, convening conversations, things like that. It's interesting because when I think about how our work has changed with the outbreak of the pandemic, in some ways we're actually connecting more often with our members than we had been. I mean, obviously we aren't doing anything in person, and that's been a big shift because we did almost everything in person before. We had some calls when it was necessary, or people would call into meetings, but most of our stuff was done in person. But you know, the week that COVID-19 really hit St. Louis, which was like the second week of March, and we started working from home remotely full time, our staff, and we haven't stopped since. The next week, we started hosting weekly all-member virtual meetings with our member organizations, and sometimes some guests based on what everyone is discussing. These are still happening, and that's really interesting to think about, because we used to host, like traditionally, we've hosted 2, you know, large all-member meetings per year. We have committees that meet in between then, and lots of smaller gatherings, and we have a board that meets every other month. But to really bring the full membership together and to open up the doors for that, we would really only do that twice a year. And it was always like a big deal. It was a couple hours long. We'd usually have lunch or snacks, or we always hosted it somewhere different in the region. And we've been all over the place for all member meetings. We had our spring one actually last Friday virtually, and we were all reflecting on that beforehand. But anyway, so we used to have 2 of those per year, and since March 20th, we've actually hosted 10 all-member meetings, all of them virtual, and they've had different turnouts. You know, like some of them have been, you know, over 40 members have been able to join, and some of them have been smaller. You know, like 15 to 20 members, depending on the time and the topic. But we think that's important, you know, to have those different size spaces and different types of venues for conversations. So yeah, it's been interesting for sure.
What are you hearing from your members about how they've been affected by recent events?
It's a great question. So obviously it varies a lot member to member. I think one of the coolest things that's happened with the all member calls is that because there's so many different types of organizations in our network, there have been a lot of opportunities to connect across sectors and silos to both secure mutual support, and not just in the directions you would expect that support normally flows. Like obviously lenders have a really important role to play in supporting nonprofits, and the same with funders. But it's really, I mean, all the members of the CBN network, when they come to tables like this, people are clearly very open to learning from each other. There isn't that, you know, hierarchy that's set in stone. We all understand that, like, we all bring something different and important and special to the table. So there's a lot of mutual learning going on. I'm kind of getting away from your question, so I'll circle back to that. Varies a lot, organization to organization. I mean, obviously, starting with the mission members, which I don't think I explained that before, but our mission members are those community-based organizations that are doing the work in neighborhoods. So really the core, the heart of our network. We have over 30 of them, and they are all serving really different communities. And obviously, it's no secret that communities north of the Del Mar Divide and Black residents have been the hardest hit by COVID-19 in St. Louis for a wide range of issues related to structural racism. And many of our mission members, just because of the nature of what this work is like, serve those communities. And so there's a lot of immediate needs right now that are these community building nonprofits, our members, are uniquely equipped to address. And just to kind of get more specific, many of them, or I think I can't even say many of them, I can probably say all of them are really working around the clock right now to ensure that their residents' needs in the neighborhoods they serve are getting met. That includes anything from delivering groceries to, you know, and personal protective equipment and other essentials like diapers and toiletries and things like that. Many of them also provide housing, so they're providing rental assistance and forgiveness and working with tenants on things like maintenance and, you know, how do you figure out how to organize and have meetings and, you know, do these things when we can't actually be with each other. There are many, as I'm sure you know, many neighborhoods have lots of older adults living in them that don't, well, I shouldn't segment and say that it's necessarily only older adults that don't have access to technology. That is one way to not have access to technology, or one, I'm saying this in, hold on a second, sorry. Many older adults don't have access to technology, and so they're working to try to make sure that they can stay in touch with the folks that they serve in that way. And like I was trying to say before and stumbling over my words, it's not just older adults. Many families in general just don't have access to technology. And I know some of the schools have stepped up to try to connect, if they have kids at home, to try to connect them with distance learning. But that hasn't been a perfect process either. And, you know, when you have access to technology, you don't always have access to the internet and the hotspot that you need to actually connect via that technology, or vice versa. If you have access to internet, maybe you don't have the equipment that you need to connect. And so I'm rambling a little bit, but basically, I mean, what our members are most focused on right now, the community building nonprofits, and by proxy, many of the mission members, because, or the supporting members, because they're supporting that work, is meeting the most immediate needs of the residents they serve during this crazy, unpredictable, you know, scary time. And it's been really, really heartening to see, and really inspiring to see. One of my favorite things about the weekly calls that we've been having with our members is watching folks exchange information and just get to talk about the incredible things that they've spent the last week or two doing. It's just, like I said, they're really working around the clock, and they are in many ways uniquely positioned to serve neighbors in this way right now. So that's been cool to see. But if we actually just launched this, I want to say about a month ago now. It's easy to get to on our website because it's linked from the homepage, but we have started putting together a blog to highlight CBN member bright spots in general, but we have a special highlight reel that is recapping how members are responding to COVID-19 specifically. So if anyone's interested in reading more, you can go to our website, communitybuildersstl.org, and right from the homepage, it'll have a little button that says our network's COVID-19 response. And that'll take you to a page where we've got some posts about what members are doing. We update it frequently, so yeah, there's lots going on for sure.
I will definitely add that to the comments on this YouTube clip as well, so that people can go straight to the website from there.
Thank you.
Since we've got people that go to College Church come from every corner of the city and beyond. What are some tips that you would have for them about how they can connect in with some of these organizations and the network as a whole, to find out how to help right where they live and work?
I appreciate you asking this, because we like to say community building is a team sport, and so it takes all of us to make it happen. So we're always really excited when we hear about folks who want to get involved, because there's really, I mean, just as the members of our network are super varied and diverse and come from all different walks of life and perspectives and areas of expertise, the folks that support that work on the ground are also bring that diversity of perspective to volunteering and ways to support. So a couple really easy things. Also on our website, if you go there and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a button that says subscribe. We have a monthly newsletter that comes out every month on the first Wednesday. So our next one is coming out just in a couple days. So that's a way to stay updated at least once a month. I mentioned the COVID-19 response page. So that's going to be a great, really current way to stay, you know, plugged into the stuff that members are doing right now. And as we hear about volunteer opportunities, we'll certainly post them there, and we'll post them on other channels too. More generally, also on our website, you can take a look at a list of the different member organizations that we serve. Their websites are linked from that page. And so if you want to go read about some of the more specific work they're doing, you can definitely do that. And I know our members always appreciate that when folks are interested in supporting, you know, whatever that means. And obviously volunteering is evolving a lot right now, as we're all distancing. But the other big thing I would say is as I mentioned, I think earlier in the call, we support 7 other community-based coalitions that are all doing very different work. And we have a page for each of those on our website. And some of them are more appropriately geared toward volunteer work than others. But one in particular that I can call out is the St. Louis Vacancy Collaborative. They've been around for a couple years. And they're a coalition of partners that are specifically dedicated to reducing the negative impact of vacant property in the city of St. Louis. It's definitely no secret, I think, to anyone who lives here that St. Louis has a vacancy challenge. Since its peak population in 1950, St. Louis City has experienced something like a 63% decline in population. I think we were around 850,000 people then, and now we're around 300,000 in the city, not the county, city specifically. But that's left behind some like 25,000 vacant properties. Actually our community has one of the highest rates of vacancy in the country. So it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And it's an opportunity to really harness this unique type of cross-sector collaborative work, because vacancy is an issue that touches every sector and every aspect of life. It's not something that can be solved by one sector, organization, or silo alone. And so this coalition is working on that. They support 6 different working groups that are all open to the public, and they're made up of practitioners, residents, folks from I keep saying walk of life and perspective, but really every angle of the work that you can possibly imagine. And they've been formalized since 2018, but it really, that coalition was really built on some grassroots efforts and other things that have been bubbling up in the years before. So the St. Louis Association of Community Organizations, which is one of our partners, championed Proposition NS back in that was 2017. And the city of St. Louis has also been working on and thinking about this for a number of years. So the Vacancy Collaborative as a formalized entity is new-ish, but it's really grown on the foundations of some really amazing efforts that our partners have put forth over the past 5 to 7 years. And anyway, I keep getting away from the working groups, but those are all open to the public. And if you go to stlvacancy.com, let me make sure that's the right, there's a page for them on our website, but they also have their own website. So yes, it is stlvacancy.com. And there's information there about the working groups and when they meet. I think they're adjusting the meetings now to be, obviously they haven't met in person since all of this started with COVID, but they are still gathering and working. And they actually have an 18-month work plan that they released a few months ago that basically lays out specific action steps that the working groups and the coalition in general are taking over the next less than 18 months now, but over the next year and a half-ish to really work toward a St. Louis where no neighborhood has to be defined by vacancy. So, but there are a number of other coalitions as well. That's just one of the biggest and most robust. And there's the 6 working groups where it's obvious to plug in. And in general, if anyone's interested in getting involved, I would just encourage them to reach out to one of our team members, and we are always more than happy to talk through, what they're interested in and where they might best bring their gifts to the table. So
that's great. And how did you personally get involved in this kind of work?
Oh, that's a good question. So I actually, before I got involved in this work, I was in the retail grocery world for a little over 5 years. That was my first job after graduating from college. And I worked for Save-A-Lot food stores. So they actually have I really admire their work for a number of reasons, but one of them is that they really focus on getting fresh produce, fresh groceries to neighborhoods that are often underserved by traditional grocery stores. So I had a number of different roles with them. I moved here actually in 2012 from Michigan. My first role with them was as a warehouse supervisor in one of their facilities in Michigan. And I moved there from Wisconsin, which is where I grew up from the time I was 9. So I moved here in 2012 to take a job at the corporate office after working in one of their warehouses for a couple of years. And that was 2012. And in 2014, Ferguson happened. And I had already been thinking kind of critically about some of the work that I was doing and whether it's what I wanted to be doing forever. And then that moment, that collective moment for our community and our country just really changed. It just changed a lot of things for me. It called up things that were really emphasized in my college experience. I went to a small liberal arts college where social justice and equity were a big part of the teachings that we all absorbed. But so anyway, I know I'm not saying anything that's unique to. I mean, I think Ferguson was an important moment for a lot of people, but it certainly was for me. And in the following year, this wasn't a light switch by any means, but I eventually decided that I wanted to try to pivot into community-based nonprofit work. And to make a long story short, that's how I found myself at the University of Missouri St. Louis doing their Master of Public Policy Administration program. And that's how I stumbled into CBN as well. CBN was actually incubated out of the University of Missouri St. Louis. So I encountered a couple folks who were familiar with CBN in my classes. And to make a long story short, I became a GRA, a Graduate Research Assistant for Community Builders Network during my second year at the university. And I'm still here 4 years later, and I'm really, really grateful. And I never could have predicted, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, that if you'd asked me 5 years ago that that I'd get to be doing this work that is really hard, but also really rewarding, and affords all of us on our team, a chance to be part of change that is so desperately needed in our community. And CBN has plenty of growing to do in this arena, like we all do. We have some really strong roots with our like I said, we are founded by those 30 community-based nonprofits, and that gives us some really strong roots of having community leadership and racial equity at the center of our work. But we have a lot of growing left to do in this arena, a lot. And that is definitely one of our long-term goals over the next many years, that we need to keep getting closer and closer to that vision of what that means to keep that at the core of what we're doing all the time. And that's especially relevant this week, given what a frustrating and disheartening and traumatic week it's been in the ongoing struggle for racial justice. But we know that, going back to one of our core values, we know that our communities are never going to be strong and inclusive and whole while our Black neighbors are oppressed and hurt and murdered by white supremacy and white violence and police brutality. So that isn't anything new. I'm not saying anything new. And that's actually what makes it heartbreaking, the most heartbreaking. But that is definitely, that's definitely something we think about a lot and want to, again, grow into more and better over the coming years, because we acknowledge that we have lots of work to do, as we all do. And we're grateful that we get to work with so many incredible partners in the region who are also doing their best to lean into this work. So,
well, thank you for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to letting folks know more about it and seeing where that can end up, because you just never know what happens when connections are made. So
that's true.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, to anyone who's interested in getting involved, just feel free to reach out to us anytime.